Hello and welcome to live stream in 5 minutes with Bomb Beard. Here we see the intro where I'm trying to get everything set up. At this point, I'm not entirely sure what I'm planning on doing, so we kind of just feel our way through. You see me there doing a transform with some randomizing elements put into the option box to get that ground all wibbly wobbly, and then I smooth it to get the surface locked in place. We did some sculpting on the mesh component there that gets duplicated across the surface and then randomized by our random node in the mesh network. And here I'm setting up a camera to do our render thing. So bottom left you can see the Arnold render view. As a preview, we've got some depth of field going in there, I think at this point, hard to tell. And we're making some ill-advised textures now. You saw it applied and you know, I don't know how I feel about it, but the end render, it's at least interesting to see. You can get a pretty reasonable approximation at this point in the bottom left. So, yeah. At that point, I feel pretty good about having done something at least visually appealing. And we moved on to the main event of the night, spoon making. Clearly. We spend a shocking amount of time making a spoon this evening. Um, the end goal of this was to make a spoon into which we were going to pour some cereal using some end particle effects. We'll get into that very shortly here, since the spoon is now the correct adult length. And we'll start working on the cereal box here in just a few seconds. First things first, though, we're working on a little bit of lighting since the spoon is very difficult to see. You can see a little bit of that specular highlight on the bottom. And then moving on with some camera work. At this point, putting more things into layers so we can not select them accidentally. Finally, we've got some end particle emitters being created. They weren't exactly working the way I'd hoped. The direction that they were going in was very difficult to adjust. I'm used to MASH at this point, which allows you to have some initial settings just right up front, and I was so sure, intermission, I was so sure that there would be a setting for that in end particles. So I just floundered around for minutes on end trying to figure that out. But eventually, I get something that I think works pretty well. You can see here we're working with wind and changing gravity to like partial vectors and just getting lost. So eventually, I try to set everything back to a stock state, line things up with the spoon, and start creating the cereal box. We're using the spoon as sort of a scale guide here, which I think worked pretty well. Um, you got the little flappies you've got to create because every cereal box has the flappies. You can't have a cereal box without no flappies. Creating a little bit of support geometry. I had expected to be smoothing this box, so I want to have some edges being supported, but when we smoothed it, you saw back there that there was some interior faces peeking through because when you smooth an object, it gets smaller, and just usually across the board. And I guess we didn't make it correctly, so we ended up not smoothing it. Here, actually, this is an interesting part. The spoon was being smoothed in Arnold, and so I had to go back and turn off that value and just add some geometry to the spoon, which resulted in a much better approximation in the end cloth collider, so that the particles would actually stay in the spoon and not like get weirdified on the side of the spoon. It was a weird problem I've run into a bunch of times with simulations, so we got through that pretty quickly. So we're trying a solid fractal particle. Bleh. We're doing a solid fractal texture through which the stuff is being poured. And so as it moves through the space, it's getting that fractal texture applied to it. And at this point, I wasn't really expecting the blobbiness to be as blobby as it is. I was hoping for some particles like we saw earlier. But, as the night progressed, I was just kind of willing to do whatever. So we switched it over to a lava kind of serial narrative idea. And it worked out pretty well. I decided to go with an emissive texture so that it would light up the surroundings, and we just turned down the um, rest of the lights to compensate, and we ended up with some pretty decent glow going on. And we've opened up After Effects at this point, and we're trying to get the gamma correction settings fixed because I didn't do the linear workflow correctly. So you have to fix it in post, which is kind of annoying. But that's kind of the point of the workflow. And here you can see the final result. thank you so much for joining me, and I hope to see you guys next time.